The night was silent, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock that hung crooked on the peeling wall. 65 years of life had taught me many lessons, but nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that was about to unfold. My name is Yusuf, and for most of my life, I believed I had built a home founded on love, respect, and sacrifice. But sometimes, the ones you bleed for are the first to push you into the fire. I had worked my fingers to the bone since I was a boy. From sunup to sundown, I labored in workshops, fields, and later in a small shop that I proudly called mine. My dream was simple, not wealth, not fame, but to give my children the life I never had. I built a roof over their heads, fed them, clothed them, educated them. I poured every ounce of strength I had into raising them. And out of all of them, my eldest son, Hamza, was the one I trusted the most. Or so I thought. When his mother died years ago, I stood firm, even when grief nearly broke me. I became both father and mother to Hamza. I stayed awake through his exams, worked double shifts to pay for his education, and swallowed my hunger so he could eat. Every wrinkle on my face carries the story of sacrifice. Every scar on my hands tells of the battles I fought to keep my family safe. And for what? So that one day, my own blood would stand before me and call me a burden. It started subtly. Hamza had grown distant. He stopped sitting with me for tea, stopped asking how I was feeling. At first, I excused it as the busyness of modern life, work, friends, distractions. But soon, I noticed how he looked at me. Not with the eyes of a son, but with the cold calculation of someone waiting for an old man to step aside. He would whisper to his wife in the corner of the room, their voices low but not low enough. I heard words like old, useless, and property. My heart sank, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was just stress speaking. I didn't want to believe the storm brewing inside my own house. One evening, the truth finally surfaced. I was sitting in the courtyard, my prayer beads slipping slowly between my fingers, when Hamza walked up with an expression I had never seen before. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard, and his tone carried no warmth. "Abba," he began, "it's time you moved out. You can't keep staying here. This is my house now." His words struck me like thunder. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My house. The very house I built brick by brick with my own hands? The walls that carried the echo of his first cries, his first steps? I felt the ground tremble beneath me. I stared at him, unable to form words. My lips trembled, my chest tightened, and for the first time in years, tears filled my eyes. He mistook my silence for weakness. "Abba, you don't understand," he continued coldly. "You're old now. You should live somewhere else, maybe with relatives, maybe in an old-age home. You can't manage here anymore. And besides, this house, it's mine now. You signed it over years ago." His smirk in that moment will never leave my memory. I had signed the papers, yes, but out of trust, out of love. A father doesn't think twice when handing over his property to his son. He believes blood is thicker than water. He believes loyalty runs in the veins of his child. But that night, I realized some blood carries poison. I wanted to scream, to shout, to shake him by the shoulders and ask him how he could forget everything I had done for him. But my voice cracked, and only a whisper escaped. "Hamza, I gave you everything. How can you do this to me?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his face away, as though my presence itself disgusted him. His wife stood behind him, her arms crossed, her face twisted in disdain. I saw it then, this was not just his decision. She had poisoned his mind, turned his heart against me. But even that knowledge didn't ease the pain. Betrayal from your own child cuts deeper than any knife. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my thin mattress, staring at the ceiling as memories crashed over me like waves. Hamza as a boy, running barefoot in the yard, laughing as I chased him with a wooden toy. Hamza as a teenager, crying when he failed his exam, and me staying up all night to tutor him. Hamza as a young man, trembling before his wedding, and me holding his hand, assuring him he was ready. Every moment of love I had poured into him replayed in my mind, taunting me with the question, how could he forget? By morning, the decision was made. I would not beg. I would not cry. If my own son saw me as a burden, then I would show him the strength he thought I had lost. Revenge was not in my nature. I was a man of patience, of forgiveness. But there comes a time when silence becomes complicity, and I refused to let him bury me alive while I was still breathing. Revenge, for me, would not come with violence or anger. It would come with wisdom, with the very skills life had carved into me. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. I would not raise my voice, but I would raise my worth. I would not strike, but I would stand. And when the time came, Hamza would understand that the father he discarded was not weak, but far stronger than he ever imagined. The story of my revenge began quietly, like a seed planted in dry soil. Invisible, unassuming, but destined to grow into something unstoppable. And as I watched the sun rise on that fateful day, I whispered to myself, "Hamza, my son, you have mistaken patience for weakness. But now, you will learn who your father truly is." The days that followed were heavy with silence. I moved through the house like a ghost, unseen, unwanted, but still breathing. Every corner reminded me of what I had built. The walls still carried my sweat, the floors my labor, the roof my prayers. But to Hamza, I was nothing more than an old shadow, blocking his light. That hurt me more than words can capture. Yet, behind my stillness, a fire began to burn. I knew that if I confronted him directly, I would lose. His wife's whispers had already sealed his heart. Instead, I decided to do what an old man knows best: observe, wait, and plan. I began to notice the little things: the way Hamza came home late, the frustration in his tone when bills piled up, the way his wife complained about money. They thought I was blind, deaf, and foolish. But age sharpens the eyes in ways youth can't imagine. One evening, while Hamza was out, I sat quietly in the living room pretending to read. His wife didn't realize I was listening when she spoke on the phone. Her words sliced through the silence. "He doesn't know how much debt we're in. If we sell the land, we can clear it all. But the old man is still here, and he keeps watching everything." My heart skipped a beat. Debt. Selling land. The pieces fell into place. They didn't just want me gone out of convenience. They needed full control to fix their own mess. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. My heart was torn between sorrow and rage, but in that chaos, I found clarity. If they wanted me weak, I would be strong. If they wanted me silent, I would roar through my actions. I began reaching out to old friends, men who had walked with me through hardship, men who still respected me. Some were retired, some still ran small businesses, but all of them remembered my loyalty. They welcomed me with warmth, and in their company, I felt alive again. I shared little at first, just casual talk, but slowly I hinted at my situation. They shook their heads in disbelief. "Hamza, that boy you raised like a prince? Throwing you out?" they asked, their voices filled with anger. One of them, Ahmed, leaned forward and said, "Brother, don't let them crush you. You've given too much to be cast aside like this. You still have strength. Use it." His words struck a chord in me. Over the next few weeks, I started spending more time outside. Hamza barely noticed. He was too wrapped up in his own problems. I walked through the marketplace, observing, listening, learning. Businesses were opening, closing, struggling. But I could see opportunities where others only saw risk. That was my gift, something I had honed over decades of survival. While Hamza believed I was fading away, I was quietly sowing the seeds of my comeback. I visited my old shop, now run by strangers. It hurt to see the faded sign, the broken shelves, the neglect. That shop had once been my pride, the place where I taught Hamza about honesty and hard work. I remembered his small hands counting coins, his bright eyes watching me bargain with customers. To see him betray those very values was a wound that cut deep. But instead of despair, I felt something else: motivation. If I had built once, I could build again. One afternoon, as I sat sipping tea at a corner stall, an idea took root in my mind. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I didn't need to fight Hamza with fists or words. I would fight him with success, with proof that the old man he called useless still had the power to stand tall. Revenge, for me, would not be in shouting or forcing him to respect me. It would be in living so strongly that he had no choice but to bow his head in shame. I began small. I took a loan from an old friend, not a large sum, just enough to start. With it, I bought second-hand tools, some raw material, and rented a tiny corner in the bazaar. People laughed at first. "An old man of 65 starting fresh," they mocked. But I didn't flinch. I had faced hunger, storms, and death. A few words could not shake me. I poured myself into that little workshop, crafting, selling, bargaining with the same fire I had decades ago. Slowly, customers trickled in. Slowly, coins clinked in my pocket. Hamza didn't notice at first. To him, I was just wandering aimlessly, wasting my time. He didn't care enough to ask where I went or what I did. That suited me. I wanted him blind to what I was building. Every night, I returned late, tired but satisfied. Every morning, I rose with renewed determination. My hands ached, my back throbbed, but my heart was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Weeks turned into months. My small workshop grew. The same people who once mocked me now returned as customers. They saw the quality of my work, the honesty in my dealings. Word spread, and soon my little corner stall became a buzzing hub. I hired 2 young men to help me, boys who reminded me of myself when I first started. They respected me, listened to my guidance, and worked with energy. With them by my side, the burden felt lighter. Meanwhile, Hamza's life began to unravel. His debts piled higher. His wife's complaints grew louder. I watched silently as cracks formed in the walls of their marriage. I heard their arguments late at night, her accusing him of failure, him blaming others. I pitied him, but I did not intervene. He had chosen his path, and now he would walk it. One night, I returned home later than usual. Hamza was sitting in the living room, his head in his hands, his face pale with worry. He looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I saw the boy I once knew, the boy who had leaned on me for comfort. But just as quickly, the hardness returned to his eyes. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't ask how I was. He only muttered under his breath about bills and problems. I went to my room, closed the door, and smiled to myself. The tide was turning. Revenge was not about destroying him. It was about rising above, about showing him that the father he had underestimated was far from finished. And with every passing day, I was one step closer to that moment of reckoning. The first time Hamza realized something was different was on a Friday afternoon. I came home carrying a bag filled with fresh groceries, meat, vegetables, even fruit. His wife frowned, her eyes narrowing as she asked, "Where did you get all this?" I smiled faintly and replied, "From an old friend." I didn't owe her the truth. Let them wonder. Suspicion is a slow poison, and I wanted it to seep quietly into their minds. I noticed Hamza looking at me differently that evening. He didn't ask directly, but his eyes followed me. The arrogance that once filled his face was mixed with curiosity. He was used to seeing me as fragile, dependent, someone waiting for his mercy. But that day, something unsettled him. He had underestimated me, and deep down, he knew it. While the house simmered with tension, my world outside was blossoming. The workshop had become a place of pride not only for me, but also for the young men who worked by my side. They called me Ustad, a title that carried respect. I guided them patiently, teaching them not just the craft but also the ethics of hard work. I saw in their eyes the gratitude and trust that my own son had once shown but had long abandoned. It warmed me, healed me. Money began to flow steadily. I didn't indulge in luxuries. I didn't need them. Every rupee I earned was a stone added to the fortress of my revenge. Quietly, I opened a bank account, something Hamza knew nothing about. Slowly, savings piled up. I wasn't rich yet, but I had something far more valuable than wealth: independence. One evening, as I walked through the bazaar after closing shop, an old acquaintance approached me. It was Rashid, a man I hadn't seen in years. He was surprised to find me working again. "Yusuf Bhai," he said, "you're still sharp, mashallah. I have a proposal for you." He told me about a small business venture, supplying handcrafted goods to a larger store. At first, I hesitated. I was already stretched thin. But Rashid's words sparked something in me. This was not just work, it was expansion. It was proof that I was still capable of growing, still capable of more. I agreed. Within weeks, orders started rolling in. My workshop buzzed with activity. We worked long hours, but there was joy in the labor. The young men I had hired looked at me with admiration. "Ustad," they said, "you work harder than all of us." I laughed, though inside, I felt the ache of age in my bones. Yet pain meant nothing compared to the fire that drove me. Back at home, Hamza's struggles deepened. Creditors knocked on the door, demanding repayment. His wife's patience wore thin. Their arguments became so loud that even neighbors began to gossip. I stayed silent, a spectator in the house that was once my kingdom. He still didn't know about my new life, and I wanted it that way. Patience is the sharpest weapon. The longer you hold it, the deeper it cuts when released. One night, Hamza confronted me. His voice was sharp, laced with frustration. "Abba, where do you keep going every day? Don't you realize you should rest? You're old. What are you even doing outside?" I looked at him calmly, my gaze steady. "I go where I am valued," I replied softly. His face reddened, his fists clenched. He wanted to argue, but my words had pierced too deeply. He turned away, muttering under his breath. That was the first time he felt the sting of his own arrogance. Meanwhile, my workshop's success began to draw attention. Local traders approached me with offers. They admired not just the quality of the goods, but also the discipline I maintained. I treated every deal with honesty, every customer with respect. My reputation grew, and with it, my business. It was as though life itself was rewarding me for the years I had given selflessly. The irony was not lost on me. Hamza, with all his youth, education, and opportunities, was drowning in debt. And I, the useless old man, was rising again. But I didn't celebrate openly. No, that moment would come later, when the truth would crash down on him like a storm. For now, I worked silently, steadily, building a foundation he could never shake. One Saturday evening, as I closed the shop, Ahmed, the same friend who had once encouraged me, visited. He looked at me proudly. "Brother, you've done more in these months than many young men manage in years. Do you know what people are saying? They say you've risen from the ashes." His words filled me with a quiet satisfaction. But more than pride, I felt gratitude. Gratitude that even at this age, I could still shape my destiny. Yet, revenge was still far from complete. My success outside was hidden from Hamza, but the time was approaching when he would see it all. And when he did, I wanted the shock to be so great that it shattered his arrogance forever. At home, his wife's bitterness grew sharper. She spoke to me with disdain, her words dripping with disrespect. But I let them pass over me like rain on stone. I no longer sought their approval, their kindness, or even their acknowledgement. My worth was no longer tied to their treatment. That realization gave me peace, a peace Hamza could never understand. One night, I overheard another heated argument between Hamza and his wife. She accused him of failure, of being unable to provide. Her voice trembled with rage as she said, "Even your old father seems more capable than you." The silence that followed was heavy. I knew her words had struck him like a dagger. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I sat in my room quietly, my heart pounding. For the first time, someone other than me had reminded him of his failure. Perhaps fate itself was conspiring with me. The next morning, he avoided me, his face dark with shame and anger. He didn't meet my eyes, didn't speak a word. I didn't push him. Silence can be louder than any scolding, and I let it echo between us. Inside, I could feel the moment approaching, the moment when my revenge would finally take shape. Revenge wasn't about humiliating him in public. It wasn't about shouting or fighting. It was about making him see, with his own eyes, the man he had discarded rising higher than he could ever imagine. And as each day passed, the weight of that truth grew heavier, waiting to fall upon him. Hamza's downfall didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one stronger than the last. His business ventures began to collapse under the weight of debt. Creditors came more often, their voices louder, their threats sharper. His wife no longer hid her frustration. She spoke openly about his failures, sometimes even in front of me. I never joined the conversation, but my silence was louder than any insult. He knew I was listening. He knew I saw him crumbling. One evening, I returned from the workshop carrying a small briefcase. Inside it was the day's earnings, enough to cover groceries for weeks. As I stepped into the courtyard, Hamza was pacing like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes darting to the briefcase. "What's that?" he demanded. I placed it on the table without answering, calmly taking off my shoes. His curiosity burned, but his pride chained his tongue. He couldn't bring himself to ask directly, not yet. Days later, his wife couldn't contain herself. "Your father is hiding something," she hissed during an argument I overheard through the thin walls. "He comes home with money, with food, with things we can't afford. Do you even know what he's doing?" Hamza snapped back, but his voice was unsteady. The seed of suspicion had been planted. I let them stew in their doubts. Meanwhile, my workshop had grown into something I had never imagined. Orders came not just from local traders but from towns beyond. I had hired more young men, eager to learn and earn. They respected me deeply, often saying, "Ustad, you're like a father to us." Their words filled the emptiness Hamza had left. Life has a strange way of giving. When one door closes, another opens wider than you ever dreamed. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that true revenge required timing. It wasn't enough for me to succeed. Hamza had to see it, feel it, be crushed by it. And so, I waited for the right moment, like a hunter waiting for prey to walk into the trap. That moment arrived sooner than expected. One afternoon, Hamza received a legal notice. His creditors were taking him to court over unpaid loans. Panic spread through the house like wildfire. His wife shouted, accused, cursed. Hamza sat pale and trembling, his head buried in his hands. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not just fear of money, but fear of losing everything. That night, he came to my room. He knocked softly, something he hadn't done in months. When I opened the door, he looked smaller, weaker, like a child once again. "Abba," he whispered, I need your help." The words hung in the air, heavy with shame. My heart clenched. A part of me longed to embrace him, to wipe away his tears as I once did. But another part of me, the part scarred by his betrayal, remained cold. I invited him in. He sat at the edge of my bed, his hands trembling. "They're going to take everything," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to do." I studied him carefully, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "When you wanted to throw me out, Hamza, did you think of this moment? Did you think of the father who gave his life for you?" His eyes filled with tears. He lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. "I was wrong," he muttered. "I was blinded. Please, Abba, forgive me." His apology felt hollow, born out of desperation rather than true regret. But still, hearing the words gave me a strange sense of victory. The son who once called me a burden was now begging for my help. The circle was complete. I didn't give him an answer that night. Instead, I told him to rest. In truth, I needed time to decide. Should I help him? Should I let him drown in the sea he had chosen? My heart battled with my mind. Revenge had been my goal, but now that it was within reach, I realized it wasn't as simple as I imagined. To let him suffer would satisfy my pride, but to lift him up, even after all he had done, would prove my true strength. The next day, I went to the workshop early. My young workers greeted me with smiles and respect. As I watched them labor with dedication, I thought about the lessons I wanted to leave behind. Was revenge truly the legacy I wished to carry? Or was it resilience, forgiveness, and dignity? By the time I returned home, I had made my decision. That evening, I called Hamza to sit with me. His wife hovered nearby, her eyes sharp, but I focused only on him. "Hamza," I began, my voice steady, "I will help you, but not in the way you expect." His eyes lit up with hope, but I raised my hand to silence him. "I will not give you money to throw into the fire of your mistakes. Instead, you will work with me. You will learn again what it means to build with your own hands." He stared at me, stunned. His pride fought against the offer, but desperation won. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, Abba. Whatever you say." The next morning, for the first time in years, Hamza followed me to the workshop. He looked out of place, his soft hands fumbling with tools, his expensive clothes stained with dust. But I didn't mock him. I guided him patiently, just as I had when he was a boy. The other workers watched in silence, understanding the weight of what they were witnessing. The great Hamza, once arrogant and proud, now standing beside his father as an apprentice. It wasn't easy for him. Every mistake, every cut on his hand, every bead of sweat humbled him further. But slowly, he began to change. His voice softened. His eyes lost some of their hardness. And for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I had once loved so dearly. Revenge had brought him to his knees, but what I chose to do next would shape not just his future but mine as well. I had shown him my strength, proved my worth, and shattered his arrogance. Now came the final choice, to crush him completely or to rebuild him alongside me. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Hamza continued to work at the workshop under my watchful eyes. At first, he came grudgingly, his pride still resisting the humility of manual labor. But hunger has a way of softening even the most stubborn spirit. Each hammer strike, each nail driven into wood, chipped away at the arrogance that had once defined him. The townspeople noticed. "Isn't that Hamza? The one who used to ride in big cars, dressed like a king?" they whispered. Some mocked, others pitied him. But no one dared to say anything in front of me. They knew my story now, how my own son had once tried to cast me aside, and how fate had turned the tables. In their eyes, I wasn't just a father anymore, I was justice itself. One evening, after a long day's work, I sat in the courtyard sipping tea. Hamza joined me, his hands blistered and raw. For the first time in years, he didn't complain. He sat quietly, staring into the distance. After a while, he spoke. "Abba, I didn't understand before. I thought money and comfort made a man strong. But now, I see that it is patience, endurance, and skill that truly matter." His words caught me off guard. They weren't forced, not born of desperation. They carried sincerity. I turned to look at him, and for the first time in many years, I saw humility in his eyes. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I had waited too long for this moment to let emotions take over. "Life has a way of teaching lessons," I replied softly. "But only if we are willing to learn." He nodded, his head bowed. In that silence, something shifted between us. The wall of betrayal and resentment didn't vanish, but cracks had begun to form. Whether forgiveness would flow through those cracks or not, time would decide. But revenge wasn't just about changing Hamza, it was about restoring balance. And I still had one final step left in my plan. You see, while Hamza worked by my side, his creditors grew impatient. They wanted their money, and they wanted it fast. They began seizing his remaining assets, piece by piece. The house he once called his own was nearly stripped bare. His wife grew restless, bitter, and cruel. She blamed me openly, accusing me of humiliating her husband. But I paid her no mind. My battle wasn't with her, it was with Hamza's pride, and that battle was nearly won. Then came the day when the creditors arrived at our door, demanding full payment. Hamza broke down completely, falling to his knees. "I have nothing left," he pleaded. "Take whatever you want." They laughed at his misery. That was when I stepped forward. "Leave this house," I told them firmly. "From this day forward, Hamza owes you nothing." The creditors sneered, thinking I had lost my senses. But then I handed them a stack of documents, proof that their debt had already been cleared. They stared in disbelief. Hamza's eyes widened, his jaw dropped. "Abba, you paid them," he stammered. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "With the money I earned through hard work, with the sweat of my brow. I settled every single one of your debts." The creditors, stunned and speechless, left in silence. Hamza remained frozen, staring at me as though he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. His wife, for once, was silent too. The truth was undeniable. The father he had once called useless, weak, and a burden had saved him from total ruin. Tears filled Hamza's eyes. He dropped to the ground before me, clutching my feet. "Abba, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I betrayed you, I tried to throw you out, and yet you saved me." His sobs shook his body. For years, I had imagined this moment, imagined the satisfaction of seeing him broken. And yes, there was a bitter sweetness in his tears. But more than that, I felt a strange peace wash over me. I had proven my strength, not through cruelty, but through resilience. "Hamza," I said, pulling him to his feet. "Revenge is not always about destruction. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is showing those who hurt us that we are stronger than they ever imagined. That we can rise, even when they wish to see us fall." He nodded, weeping openly. His wife looked away, unable to face the truth. From that day forward, Hamza's transformation was complete. He no longer lived like a king, but he worked like a man. Slowly, he rebuilt his dignity, not through wealth, but through labor. And though scars remained between us, something far greater began to grow: respect. The townspeople looked at me with admiration. "This man," they said, "was betrayed by his own blood, yet he rose higher than anyone thought possible. He is proof that patience and perseverance are stronger than betrayal." Their word spread, and my workshop flourished even more. People wanted to do business with a man who had defied betrayal, who had turned humiliation into strength. At 65, when I thought my life would end in loneliness and disgrace, I found a new beginning. I had faced betrayal, I had tasted bitterness, but I had also carved out victory from the ashes of despair. My son had learned his lesson, and I had reclaimed my honor. But make no mistake, this was not forgiveness born easily. It was the result of pain, of endurance, of choices that weighed heavy on my heart. Revenge had guided me, but dignity had saved me. And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all.